It was around this time that the national exam was approaching. For Asanda, it was more than just a test, it was a ticket to a scholarship that could potentially change her life. But with all the pressures at home, I worried she wouldn't be able to focus. The odds seemed stacked against her. But if I had learned anything about Asanda, it was that she wasn't someone who gave up easily. The day of the exam arrived, and the air in Soweto was thick with anticipation. For Asanda, this was it. This was her chance to prove to everyone, including herself, that she could rise above her circumstances. She had studied tirelessly, sometimes by the faint light of a street lamp when the electricity in her home was cut off. I watched her from the back of the exam hall, her head bent over the paper, her pencil moving furiously. There was a fire in her eyes, a determination that burned brighter than ever. But as the minutes ticked by, I could see the fatigue setting in. Her hands slowed, and her head drooped slightly. "Come on, Asanda," I whispered under my breath. "You can do this." But fate had one more challenge in store for her. Just as she was about to finish, there was a loud commotion outside the school. A group of young men, including her brothers, had been involved in a fight, and the police had been called. I saw Asanda's head snap up at the sound of sirens. Fear flickered across her face, and I knew exactly what she was thinking: her family. I rushed to her side, crouching down next to her desk. "Focus, Asanda," I whispered. "This is your moment. Don't let anything distract you." She nodded, blinking away the tears, and went back to her exam. But the noise outside grew louder, and soon, the police stormed into the school, dragging the boys into custody. Asanda's brothers were among them, their faces bloodied and bruised. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping the floor, and made to run toward them. But I caught her arm. "Asanda," I said firmly, "you have to finish." Her eyes met mine, wide and full of fear. "But my brothers, they will be fine," I assured her, though I wasn't sure myself. "You've worked too hard for this. Don't let it slip away now." She hesitated for a moment before sitting back down, her hands trembling as she picked up the pencil again. The room had fallen into a tense silence, but Asanda pushed through, finishing the exam just in time. When the results came in a few weeks later, I was the one to deliver the news to her. She had passed, with flying colors. Her scholarship application was accepted, and her dream of attending university was within reach. I will never forget the look on her face when I handed her that letter. It was a mixture of disbelief, joy, and relief. Despite all the odds stacked against her, Asanda had done it. Her journey was far from over. But this was the first victory in a long battle that had tested her resilience and strength in ways no child should have to endure. The celebration at her home that evening was bittersweet. Her mother, teary-eyed and filled with pride, held Asanda close, but her brothers, still entangled in trouble with the law, sat in sullen silence. The divide between them and their sister had grown deeper, with Asanda choosing a path they couldn't or wouldn't follow. The scholarship, however, came with its own set of challenges. It covered her tuition, but not the cost of transportation, textbooks, or basic necessities. Asanda was going to need more than just a scholarship to survive in university. I watched her wrestle with this new reality. She was closer to her dream than ever, but the obstacles kept piling up. "I'll make it work, sir," she told me one day, her voice steady but her eyes uncertain. "I've come this far. I can't stop now." I believed her, but I also knew the road ahead would be difficult. University wasn't like primary or secondary school. The demands were greater, and Asanda wouldn't have the safety net of familiarity. Still, if anyone could make it, it was her. The day Asanda left for university was a moment of both triumph and sorrow. Her mother, now more frail than before, packed her a small bag with what little they could afford, second-hand clothes and a few old books. The community had come together, raising a bit of money to help her with transport and some basic supplies, but it was barely enough to get her through the first few weeks. I remember standing outside the bus station with her, watching as she boarded a dusty old bus bound for the city. Her face was a mix of excitement and fear, and I couldn't help but worry for her. Would she make it in this new world, so far from home? Would the pressures of university life and financial hardship be too much for her to bear? The first few months were tough. Asanda struggled to adjust to the fast pace of university life. She shared a tiny room with 2 other students and survived on the bare minimum. She often called home, asking her mother if there was any way they could send her a little extra money for textbooks, but there was none to spare. Despite these hardships, Asanda threw herself into her studies. She spent late nights in the library, determined to stay ahead of her coursework. She worked part-time jobs, cleaning houses, waiting tables, anything to earn a little extra money. There were days when she considered quitting, when the weight of her circumstances threatened to crush her spirit. One particular evening, after a long shift at the diner, Asanda sat down at her desk, her textbooks open in front of her, but the words blurred as exhaustion took over. She put her head in her hands and wept quietly. For the first time, she felt like maybe this dream was too big for her, too far out of reach. But then, she remembered her mother's words from long ago, "You are meant for more. Asanda, don't let anything stop you."